Chapter 2 of the Boy Scouts in Russia by John Blaine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Kangaroo 692. Under arrest. So it was arranged for Fred Waring, thousands of miles from home, to start from Verballen. The lieutenant who had saved him from Suvaroff lent him what money he could spare, though all told it was less than 100 marks, which is $20. "Goodbye, and good luck go with you," said Ernst. "If we do not meet again, it will be a real goodbye. If you can send the money back, let it go to my mother in Danzig. If you cannot, do not let it worry you. If any people ask you questions, answer them quickly. If any tell you to stop, stop. Remember that this is wartime and every stranger is suspected. You will be in no danger if you remember to answer questions and obey orders." "Thank you again, and goodbye," said Fred. He had known this German officer for only a few minutes, but he felt that he was parting from a good friend, and indeed he was. Not many men would have been so considerate and kindly, especially at such a time, to a strange boy from a foreign land, and one, moreover, who had been certainly not come with the best of recommendations. "I hope you'll come through all right." "That's to be seen," said Ernst, with a shrug of his shoulders. "In war, who can tell? We take our chances, we who live by the sword. If a Russian is to get me, he will do so, and it will not help to be afraid, or to think of the chances that I may not see the end of what has been begun tonight. We have been getting ready for years. Now we shall know before long if we have done enough. The test has come for us of the fatherland." And then Fred said a bold thing. "I can wish you good luck and a safe return, Lieutenant," he said. "But I can't wish that your country may be victorious because my mother, after all, was a Russian." "I wouldn't ask that of you," said Ernst with a laugh, "even though it is Prince Suvaroff's country, too." "There are Germans you do not like, I suppose, who are even your enemies," said Fred. "Yet now you will forget all that, will you not?" "God helping us, yes," said Ernst. "You are right. Your heart must be with your own. But you don't seem like a Russian, or I would not be helping you." Then Fred was off, going on his way into the darkness alone. Ernst had told him which road to follow, telling him that if he stuck to it he would not be likely to run into any troop movements. "Don't see too much. That is a good rule for one who is in a country at war," he had advised. "If you know nothing, you cannot tell the enemy anything useful, and there will be less reason for our people to make trouble for you. Your only real danger lies in being taken for a spy, and if you are careful not to learn things, that will not be a very great one." Fred was not at all afraid, as a matter of fact, as he set out. Before he had stepped across the mark that stood for the border, he had been hugely depressed. He had been friendless and alone. He had been worse than friendless, indeed, since the only man for a few miles about who knew him was his bitter enemy. Now he had found that he could still inspire a man like Ernst with belief in his trustfulness and honesty, and the knowledge did him a lot of good. And then, of course, he had another excellent reason for not being afraid. He was entirely ignorant of the particular dangers that were ahead of him. He had no conception at all of what lay before him, and it does not require bravery not to fear a danger, the very existence of which one is entirely without knowledge. The idea of walking all through the summer night, as Ernst had advised him to do, did not seem bad to him at all. As a scout at home, he had taken part in many a hike, and if few of them had been at night, he was still thoroughly accustomed to being out of doors, without even the shelter of a tent or lean-to. Nor was he afraid of losing his way, for as long as the stars shone above, as they did brilliantly now, he had a sure guide. Fred wasn't tired, for he had enraged Suvaroff, who had seemingly wanted him to be frightened, by sleeping during the journey to Verballen whenever he could. It had been comfortable enough on the train. He had not been treated as a prisoner, but as a guest, and he had, as a matter of fact, been aroused only an hour before the train had reached the frontier. So he had been able to start out boldly and confidently. In the country through which he was now tramping, the nights are cruel in summer, but the days are very hot. So Fred had made up his mind, as soon as he understood that he had a good deal of walking before him, to do as much traveling as he could by night, and to sleep during the day. In East Prussia, as in some parts of Canada, the summer is short and hot. The winter is long and cold. There was nothing about the silent countryside, as he tramped along an excellent road, to make him think of war. The fields about him seemed to be planted less with grain. They were very largely used for pasture, and he saw a good many horses. He remembered now that this was the great horse-breeding district of Germany. Here there were great estates with many acres of rolling land on which great numbers of horses were bred. It was here, he knew, that the German army, needing great number of horses every year, found its mounts. They'll need more than ever now, he thought to himself. If there's really to be war, I suppose they'll take every horse that's able to work at all, whether it's a good-looking beast or not. Poor horses, they don't have much chance, I guess. He thought of the Cossacks he had seen in Russia, wiry small men in the main mounted on shaggy, strong little horses, no bigger in reality than ponies. He had heard of the prowess of the Cossacks, of course. They had fought well in the past in a good many wars. But somehow it seemed rather absurd to match them, with their undersized horses, against magnificent specimens of men and horseflesh, such as the German cavalry. He had passed a squadron of Uhlans near Verballen, outlined against the sky. They had been grim and businesslike in appearance. But then the Cossacks were that too, though in an entirely different way. I wish I had someone along, he thought at last. That was when the dawn was beginning to break. Off to the east the sun was beginning to rise, and in the gray half-light before full day, there was something stark and gaunt about the country. Before him smoke was rising, probably from a village. But that was a sign of human habitation, that certain indication that people were near. Somehow only made him feel lonelier than he had in the starlit darkness in the night. This would be good enough fun, if only one of his many friends back home were along. Jack French or Steve Vedder. It was with them that he had shared such adventures in the past. And yet not just such adventures, either. This was more real than anything his adventures as a Boy Scout had brought him. Though he had belonged to a patrol that got in a lot of outdoor work, and that camped out every summer in a practical way. Being alone took some of the zest out of what had seemed, once Lieutenant Ernst Sloane had saved him from his most pressing worry, likely to be a bully adventure. Now it seemed rather flat and stale. But that was partly because having tramped all night, he was really beginning to get tired. So he went on to the village, and there he found a little inn, where he got a good breakfast in bed, in which, as soon as he had eaten his meal, he was sound asleep. Few men were about the village when he went in. He had noticed, however, the curious little throng, early as it was, about a bulletin anonymously headed Kriegszustand. That meant mobilization and war. The men had answered the call already, all except those who were too old to spring to arms at once. Some of the older ones, he knew, would be called out, too, for garrison duty, so that younger men might go to the front. In his sleep he had many dreams, but the most insistent one was made up of the tramp of heavy feet and of the blowing of bugles and the rattling of horses' feet. And this wasn't a dream at all, for when he awoke, it was to find a soldier shaking him roughly behind the shoulders and ordering him to get up. And outside were all the sounds of his dream. The sun was high, for he had been asleep for several hours. So he got up willingly enough, and hurried his dressing because he remembered what Ernst had told him. Then he followed the German soldier downstairs, and found himself the prisoner in an impromptu sort of court-martial. Really, it wasn't as bad as that, considering that he had no passports and nothing, in fact, to show who he was, and that no responsible person could vouch for him. He was very lucky. It was because he was a boy, and obviously an American boy, that he got off so easily. For after he had answered a few questions, a major explained the situation to him very punctiliously. "You must be detained here for 2 or 3 days," said the major. "This is an important concentration district, and many things will happen that no foreigner can be allowed to see. We believe absolutely that you are not unfriendly, and that you have no intention of reporting anything you might chance to learn to the enemy. But in time of war we cannot take many risks, and you will therefore be required to remain in the village under observation. Within the village limits, you will be as free as if you were home, in your country. You will not be allowed to pass them, however, and if you try to do so, a sentry will shoot you. As soon as certain movements are completed, you will be at liberty to pass on your way to Königsberg. I will add to Lieutenant Ernst's advice. When you reach Königsberg, after you have reported yourself to the police, Wait there until the train can take you to Berlin. It will mean only a few days of waiting, for at Königsberg there are already many refugees, and the authorities want to get them to Berlin as soon as the movements of the troop trains allow the railways to be reopened for passenger traffic." Fred agreed to this. There was nothing else for him to do. For one thing, and for another, he was by no means unwilling to see whatever there might be to see and hear. He could guess by this time that without any design he had stumbled upon a spot which was reckoned rather important by the Germans, for the time being at least, and he had heard enough about the wonderful efficiency of the German army to be anxious to see that mighty machine in the act of getting ready to move. He did see a good deal, as a matter of fact, that day and the next. It was on the famous Saturday night of the 1st of August that he had left Verballen. Sunday brought news of clash with France, far away on the western border, and of the German invasion of Belgium. Monday brought word of a definite declaration of war between Germany and France, and of the growing danger that England, too, might be involved. And all of Sunday and all of Monday supplies of all sorts poured through the little village in an unceasing stream. Motor cars and trucks were to be seen in abundance, and Fred caught his first glimpse, which was not to be his last, of the wonderful German field kitchens, in the mighty ovens of which huge loaves of bread were being baked even while the whole clumsy-looking apparatus was on the move. But it only looked clumsy. Like everything else about the German army, this was a practical and efficient, well-tried device. Then suddenly, early on Tuesday, he was told that he was free to go, or would be by nightfall. And that day all signs of the German army, save a small force of Uhlans, vanished from the village. That evening, refreshed and ready for the road again, Fred set out. And that same evening, though he did not know it until the next day, England entered the war against Germany. End of chapter 2. Recording by Kangaroo 692.